The crack of leather against skin cut through the quiet restaurant like a whip. Every head turned toward the noise. There stood Marcus Ashford, his face twisted with rage, his hand still raised. Before him knelt a young woman in a simple cotton dress, her hand protectively covering her rounded belly. A red mark bloomed across her cheek. "That's what you get for embarrassing me, you worthless piece of trash," Marcus snarled, his voice dripping with hate. The woman didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She simply raised her head and met him eyes with a calm, burning intensity that made several onlookers shiver. The crowd whispered nervously, completely unaware they were watching the moment that would destroy an empire. They saw a poor pregnant woman being attacked, but they had no idea she was Elena Cross and that her father, the most powerful man on 3 continents, was about to arrive in that very restaurant for a business meeting with her husband. The Golden Crown Restaurant, Manhattan, New York. The Golden Crown Restaurant sat on the 47th floor of the Titanium Tower in the heart of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the New York skyline. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm golden light across tables draped in white silk. This was where the world's richest people came to make deals worth billions of dollars, where senators dined with CEOs, and where a single meal could cost more than most people earned in a month. It was Thursday evening, the restaurant's exclusive Power Dinner event, where only those with net worths exceeding $100 million received invitations. Men in expensive Italian suits, their wrists heavy with Rolex watches, moved between tables like sharks circling prey. Women wore designer gowns that cost more than luxury cars, their necks dripping with diamonds that could fund entire schools. It was a jungle of silk, ambition, and ruthless competition, and tonight, Elena Cross was invisible among them. Her outfit was simple, a modest blue cotton dress that fell just below her knees, flat shoes, and a thin sweater to ward off the air conditioning. At 5 months pregnant, she had a small but noticeable bump. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no jewelry except for a thin gold wedding band, no makeup except for a touch of lip gloss. To everyone in this glittering room, she looked completely out of place, like a lost secretary who had wandered into the wrong event. And that was exactly what she wanted. From her seat near a large potted palm tree in the corner, she had a perfect view of the entire restaurant. Her eyes, a striking shade of jade green, missed nothing. She watched the subtle power plays, the fake smiles hiding real hatred, the whispered deals that would be denied tomorrow, the predatory looks of corporate raiders identifying their next victims. This world was a game, one she understood better than almost anyone here, even from the shadows. Her gaze settled on a couple holding court at the center table, surrounded by admirers and hangers-on. Marcus Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, was a man who wore arrogance like a crown. He had the kind of polished good looks that photographed well: strong jaw, professionally styled blonde hair, bright white teeth, and cold blue eyes that never showed real warmth. He was the golden boy of the tech industry. His company's recent merger had made headlines for weeks, transforming him into New York's most talked-about billionaire under 40. Clinging to his arm, practically wrapped around him, was Victoria Stone. Victoria was the daughter of real estate mogul Gerald Stone, and she moved with the entitled grace of someone who had never heard the word no in her entire privileged life. Her gown was a stunning crimson Valentino creation, its fabric shimmering under the restaurant's lights with every calculated movement. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a coldness in her crystal blue eyes, a cruel twist to her perfectly painted red lips that ruined the illusion. Elena had been watching them for the past 2 hours. Marcus was her husband, though no one in this room knew it. Their marriage, a quiet civil ceremony performed 6 months ago in a small courthouse, was their most carefully guarded secret. To the world, Marcus Ashford was a bachelor, one of New York's most eligible men. To Elena, he was a mistake she was still trying to understand. Marcus was also the target of tonight's observation. Elena's father, Alexander Cross, had heard disturbing rumors. Whispers that Marcus was making promises to dangerous investors that he could possibly not keep. Stories of inflated projections, hidden debts, and reckless gambles with other people's money. Alexander, a man who built his empire on information and precision, had asked Elena to investigate quietly. Her ability to blend in, to become invisible in plain sight, was the perfect spy. Another glass of the 2015 Chateau Margaux. Victoria snapped her fingers in the air without even glancing at the approaching waiter. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, treating the service staff like furniture. Elena kept her expression neutral, her posture relaxed but attentive. She had positioned herself strategically, close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid interaction. She wasn't here to confront, she was here to learn. A waiter approached Victoria and Marcus's table with the wine. As he poured, Victoria examined her reflection in a small compact mirror, completely ignoring him. Marcus, ever the politician, gave the waiter a practiced, charming smile that never reached his eyes. "Thank you, my good man," Marcus said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. The words were right, but the tone was condescending. It was the voice of someone who believed himself fundamentally superior to the person serving him. Elena watched this exchange and made a mental note. Marcus had always been good at performing kindness when people were watching, while treating those he considered beneath him with barely concealed contempt when he thought no one...
Elena stopped. She hadn't planned to stop. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to maintain her cover, to leave quietly. But something in Victoria's voice, the pure, casual cruelty of it, made her pause. She turned slowly and met Victoria's gaze. Up close, Victoria Stone was even more striking, but her beauty was the cold, hard kind, like a diamond, brilliant but utterly without warmth. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly, her voice steady. "Were you speaking to me?" Victoria's eyes widened slightly, apparently surprised that her target had dared to respond. "Oh, it speaks," she said with a laugh. "Yes, darling, I was speaking to you. This is a private event for members only. I'm not sure how you got in here, but you clearly don't belong." Marcus glanced up, finally paying attention. He looked at Elena with a mix of annoyance and a complete lack of recognition. "Victoria, please," he said with exaggerated patience. "Don't make a scene. I'm sure she's just leaving." The fact that her own husband was dismissing her without even knowing who she was should have hurt. Instead, Elena felt a strange calm settle over her. This was who Marcus really was. This was the truth she had been avoiding. "I have as much right to be here as anyone," Elena said, her voice still quiet but carrying a new edge of steel. "Oh, really? And what's your net worth, sweetheart? Because entry to this event requires a minimum of $100 million. So unless you're hiding a fortune under that tragic little dress..." She let the insult hang in the air. Several nearby tables had stopped their conversations to watch. This was the kind of conflict that people in this world lived for. Public humiliation as entertainment. Elena felt her baby move again, a stronger kick this time, as if sensing her mother's rising stress. She placed her hand on her belly protectively. That gesture seemed to infuriate Victoria further. "God, you're even pregnant," she said with disgust. "What kind of desperate woman shows up to a place like this, pregnant and alone, if not to trap some rich fool into supporting her bastard?" The word bastard cut through the air like a knife. Elena felt her cheeks flush, not with shame, but with pure anger. This woman, this cruel, entitled creature, was insulting her unborn child. Marcus, sensing the situation spiraling, stood up. "Look, miss," he said to Elena, his voice taking on a condescending tone, "I think it's best if you just leave. You're clearly upset, and this isn't the place for whatever situation you're dealing with." He still didn't recognize her. Elena realized with crystal clarity that Marcus had never really looked at her, not truly. Even in their most intimate moments, he had been thinking about himself, his image, his ambitions. She had been a convenience, a placeholder, a secret to be kept. "I'm not upset," Elena said, her voice colder now. "I'm simply existing in a space where I have every right to be." Victoria laughed, a shrill sound that grated on the ears. "Oh, every right? Please, the only right you have is to leave before I have security throw you out." "On what grounds?" Elena challenged, her jade-green eyes locked on Victoria's blue ones. "On the grounds that you are bothering your betters," Victoria snapped back. She stood up as well, her height in 6-inch heels making her tower over Elena's smaller frame. "You come in here with your cheap dress in your poor girl problems, probably hoping to seduce some rich man into solving your life for you. It's pathetic." The entire restaurant had gone quiet now. Every conversation had stopped. All eyes were on this confrontation between the glamorous socialite and the simple, pregnant woman. Marcus put a hand on Victoria's arm. "Victoria, that's enough," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was more concerned about the scene affecting his image than about the cruelty being inflicted. Victoria shook off his hand. "No, Marcus, women like this need to learn their place. She needs to understand that this world isn't for her." She took a step closer to Elena, invading her personal space. The scent of her perfume, an overwhelming cloud of Chanel No. 5, was choking. "You want to know what I think?" Victoria continued, her voice rising. "I think you probably got yourself knocked up on purpose, thinking some rich idiot would marry you out of obligation. But here's a reality check, sweetheart. Men like the ones in this room don't marry women like you. They use you, and then they throw you away. You're disposable." Each word was designed for maximum damage, delivered with the precision of someone who had spent their entire life wielding cruelty as a weapon. Elena stood perfectly still, her hands still resting on her belly. Her face was calm, almost serene, but inside, a cold fury was building. This woman, this vicious creature, had no idea what she was talking to, had no idea what kind of storm she was about to unleash. "Are you finished?" Elena asked quietly. The question seemed to catch Victoria off guard. She had expected tears, hysteria, a satisfying breakdown. Instead, she got calm defiance. "Finished?" Victoria's voice rose another octave. "Oh, I'm just getting started. I'm going to make sure you never set foot in any respectable establishment in this city again. I'm going to—" Before she could finish her threat, Victoria did something that would change everything. She shoved Elena. It wasn't a gentle push, it was a deliberate of Alexander Cross, the woman he had just allowed to be humiliated, shoved and kicked in public. The world, as Marcus knew it, had just ended. Alexander Cross's presence in the Golden Crown restaurant transformed the place of casual cruelty into a courtroom. Every person in that room understood instinctively that they were witnessing something catastrophic. The air crackled with tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. He didn't rush to his daughter. Alexander Cross was a man who had learned long ago that true power meant absolute control, even in moments of crisis. He walked with measured, deliberate steps, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of a countdown timer. Every eye followed him. The whispered conversations died completely. Even the kitchen staff, visible through the open serving doors, had frozen in place. He stopped 5 feet from where Elena lay on the floor, his gaze sweeping over the scene with the cold precision of a surgeon examining a wound. His eyes lingered on Victoria's stone, still standing over her daughter, her expression shifting from triumph to confusion, to the first creeping tendrils of fear. Then his gaze moved to Marcus Ashford, and the young CEO visibly flinched. "Mr. Cross," Marcus managed to choke out, his voice cracking. We didn't expect you until—" Silence. The single word cut through the air like a guillotine blade. Marcus's mouth shut so fast, his teeth clicked together. Elena finally looked down at Elena. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange, an entire conversation passed between father and daughter.
"Are you hurt?" his eyes asked. "I'm okay. The baby's okay," hers answered. "Who did this?" "The woman standing over me, and him, my husband." Something dangerous flickered behind Alexander's composed expression. He extended his hand toward Elena, his voice gentling in a way that shocked everyone who heard it. "Come, sweetheart, let's get you off that floor." Elena took her father's hand, and he helped her up with a tenderness that stood in contrast to the glacial fury in his eyes. He guided her to a nearby chair, his movements protective and careful. "Are you hurt?" His hand briefly rested on her shoulder. "The baby?" "I'm fine, Dad. Just shaken." Alexander nodded once, his jaw clenching. He shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders, much too large but warm and comforting. The gesture was intimate, paternal, and it sent a fresh wave of shock through the onlookers. "Dad?" The whisper started immediately, quiet and frantic. Did she just call him Dad? Oh my God, that's his daughter? Who is she? I thought Alexander Cross didn't have any children. Victoria Stone's face had gone from flushed to bone white. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. This pregnant woman in the cheap dress was Alexander Cross's daughter? It was impossible. Alexander Cross was a ghost, a legend. No one knew anything about his personal life. He had no social media presence, he gave no interviews, he attended no public events except for the most exclusive, high-level business meetings. And this nobody in a cotton dress was his daughter? Marcus's legs felt like they might give out beneath him. His mind was spinning, fragments of information clicking into place like pieces of a nightmare puzzle. 6 months ago, he had married a woman named Elena Cross at a courthouse. She had told her father was in business, but very private. She had been quiet, unassuming, content to stay in the background while Marcus built his empire and cultivated his public image. He had thought she was nobody, a pretty face from a middle-class family who was grateful to marry into wealth. He had been catastrophically, apocalyptically wrong. Alexander turned his attention back to the room, his gaze settling on Victoria like a predator selecting its prey. "You," he said quietly, "tell me your name." Victoria's mouth opened and closed, no sound came out. Her earlier confidence had evaporated like morning mist under a scorching sun. "I asked you a question," Alexander said, his voice still quiet, but now carrying an edge that could cut diamonds. "Victoria," she stammered. "Victoria Stone." "Stone," Alexander repeated, as if tasting the name. "Gerald Stone's daughter." Victoria nodded, desperately hoping her father's name might offer some protection. Gerald Stone was a real estate mogul worth billions, a man who had built half of Manhattan's skyline. Surely that counted for something. Alexander's expression didn't change. "And you thought it was acceptable to put your hands on a pregnant woman, to push her to the ground, to kick her while she lay there?" "I didn't know who she was," Victoria blurted out, her voice rising with panic. "I thought she looked like, she was dressed like, I thought she was just some what?" Alexander interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Finish that sentence. I'm very curious to hear what you thought my daughter was." Victoria's face crumbled. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please, I didn't know." "You didn't know," Alexander repeated slowly. He took a step closer to her, and Victoria actually cowered backward. "So you're telling me that you would have behaved differently if you had known who she was? That you only treated her with cruelty because you thought she was powerless to stop you?" The question hung in the air.
Elena had told him everything 3 weeks ago, her voice breaking as she explained how her husband had asked her to stay hidden, to not tell anyone about their marriage, to wait just a little longer while he finalized his business deals. Alexander had wanted to destroy Marcus immediately, but Elena had asked him to wait. She wanted to see for herself what kind of man she had married. Now she knew, and so did everyone else. "Mr. Ashford," Alexander said, his voice cutting through Victoria's hysterics, "do you know what I was going to do tonight?" Marcus shook his head mutely. "I was going to sign a contract that would give your company exclusive access to my fiber optic infrastructure across Asia and Europe, a contract worth, conservatively, $200 billion over the next 10 years, a contract that would have made Ashford Technologies the most powerful tech company in the world." He paused. Was. Past tense. The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Mr. Cross, please." "I was also going to announce a personal investment of $50 billion in your company. I was going to use my influence to bring in additional investors from my network. By this time next year, your company would have been worth $500 billion. Marcus felt like he was going to vomit. $500 billion? The deal of the century. The deal that would have put him in the history books alongside Gates, Bezos, and Musk. "But then," Alexander said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper again, "I walked into this restaurant and saw my daughter on the floor. I saw the bruise on her face. I saw her protecting her pregnant belly. And I saw you, her husband, standing over her like she was garbage to be swept away. I didn't know it was her. The lighting, the angle, I didn't recognize." "You didn't look." The shout came from Elena, who had risen from her chair. Her jade-green eyes were blazing with a fury that rivaled her father's. "You didn't look because you never look at me, Marcus. Even when we're in the same room, you look through me. I'm convenient when you need someone to come home to, someone to cook your meals and warm your bed. But in public, I'm an embarrassment. I'm not glamorous enough, not connected enough, not useful enough for your image." Her voice cracked, but she pushed forward. "I've spent 6 months being your secret, being told to wait, to be patient, to understand that business comes first. I've hidden in our apartment while you've taken that woman," she pointed at Victoria, "to every gala, every premiere, every photo opportunity. I've watched you propose to her on national television while I was carrying your child." The pain in her voice was raw and real, and several people in the audience looked away, unable to bear witness to such intimate devastation.
"I loved you," Elena whispered. "I actually loved you. I thought you were brilliant and ambitious and just cautious about mixing business with personal life. I made excuses for you. I defended you to my father when he told me you were using me." She looked at Alexander, who met her gaze with infinite sadness and love. "He was right," she said. "He's always right. You never loved me, Marcus. You loved what you thought I could give you, a quiet, undemanding wife who would stay in the shadows while you played the bachelor billionaire. And when you found out who my father was, you must have thought you'd won the lottery." Marcus's face was sheet white. "Elena, that's not true. I do love you, I just—" "When did you find out?" Elena interrupted, her voice sharp. "When did you figure out who my father really was?" Marcus's silence was damning. "It was 3 months ago, wasn't it? I wondered why you suddenly became more attentive, why you started asking me questions about my family, why you wanted to know when might be a good time to meet my father properly." She laughed bitterly. "You'd been planning this meeting for months, this big contract. You were going to use our marriage as leverage, weren't you? Spring it on him as a surprise, make him think you'd married me without knowing who he was, prove you loved me for me. And then, once the contracts were signed, you'd finally acknowledge me publicly."
The plan, laid bare, was as transparent as it was insulting. Alexander's expression had gone from cold to absolutely arctic. "Is this true?" Alexander asked Marcus. It wasn't like that. I did love her, I do love her, but yes, when I found out, I thought it could be beneficial for both of us, for all of us, a partnership." "A partnership," Alexander repeated. "You thought you could turn my daughter into a business transaction?" "No, You humiliated her. You hid her. You proposed to another woman while your wife was pregnant. You stood by while she was attacked and did nothing." Alexander took a step closer, and Marcus actually stumbled backward. "And you thought I would reward this behavior with $200 billion?" The restaurant had gone completely silent again. Every person was holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Alexander pulled out his phone. He didn't dial, he simply pressed a button and held it to his ear. Someone answered immediately. "Richard," Alexander said, his voice calm and businesslike. "Cancel the Ashford contract. All of it. Infrastructure access, investment, everything. Send notifications to all parties involved that Cross Global Enterprises will not be doing business with Ashford Technologies now or ever." Marcus made a strangled sound. "Please, Mr. Cross, don't—" Alexander held up one finger, silencing him. He was still on the phone. "Also, call our friends at the Jensen Fund, the Blackstone Group, and the Nakamoto Consortium. Let them know that I'm personally divesting from any ventures associated with Marcus Ashford. Make it clear that any firm continuing to invest in his company will lose access to our deal flow." Marcus felt his knees go weak. Alexander Cross wasn't just canceling their deal, he was poisoning the well. The Jensen Fund, Blackstone, and Nakamoto represented hundreds of billions in investment capital. If they pulled out of Ashford Technologies, the company would collapse within weeks. "One more thing," Alexander said into the phone. "Reach out to our legal team. I want a full investigation into Ashford Technologies' financial statements for the last 2 years. Every contract, every projection, every investor promise. If there's anything irregular, and I suspect there will be, I want it referred to the SEC." He ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. The entire conversation had taken less than 90 seconds. In 90 seconds, Alexander Cross had destroyed a $10 billion company and ended Marcus Ashford's career. Marcus was shaking. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I have investors, employees, thousands of people who depend on—" "You should have thought of that before you kicked my daughter," Alexander said simply. "I didn't kick her," Marcus protested desperately. "That was Victoria. I didn't touch her." "No," Alexander agreed. "You didn't. You just stood there and watched it happen. You dismissed her pain. You called her miss and told her to leave. You saw a pregnant woman on the floor, and your only concern was avoiding a scene that might damage your reputation." He leaned in close, his voice dropping. "That makes you worse than her, Mr. Ashford. At least Victoria Stone is honest about being a monster. You hide behind a smile and expensive suits while your soul rots underneath." The condemnation was absolute and devastating. Alexander turned to the restaurant manager, who had been standing frozen near the kitchen doors. "Mr. Chen, I trust you have security footage of everything that happened here tonight." The manager nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Multiple angles, high definition." "Good. Please have copies sent to my office, to the police department, and to the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. I want the world to see exactly what kind of people these are." "Right away, sir." Mr. Chen was already pulling out his phone. Victoria let out a wail of despair. "No, please, you can't. My reputation, my family." "Your reputation?" Alexander's voice could have frozen the sun. "You assaulted a pregnant woman. You kicked her while she was on the ground. You did this in a room full of witnesses because you thought she was powerless and you could get away with it. Your reputation deserves to be destroyed." He turned to address the entire restaurant. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Power without character is not power at all. It's just cruelty with expensive clothes. And cruelty, no matter how well dressed, will always be held accountable." He offered his arm to Elena. "Come, sweetheart, let's get you home. You need to rest, and the baby needs you calm." Elena stood and took her father's arm. As they walked toward the exit, the crowd parted before them like water before a ship. No one spoke, no one moved. As they reached the door, Elena stopped and looked back one last time. Her eyes found Marcus, and for a moment she saw the man she had fallen in love with. Brilliant, ambitious, charming. But that man was an illusion, a performance designed to trap her. "I'll have my lawyer send divorce papers to your office. Don't fight it, you won't win." Marcus's face crumbled. "Elena, please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. The baby." "The baby," Elena said firmly, "will be raised by people who understand that character matters more than contracts, that love matters more than leverage, that some things in this world are more valuable than money." She placed her hand on her belly. "This child will never know you, Marcus. You gave up that right when you traded our marriage for a business deal." With that, she turned and walked out with her father, leaving Marcus Ashford standing in the wreckage of his destroyed life. The restaurant remained silent for a full 30 seconds after they left. Then, all at once, the dam broke. Everyone started talking, shouting, making phone calls, typing frantically on their phones. Victoria Stone collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically. Her designer gown was wrinkled, her makeup ruined, her entire world shattered. No amount of her father's money could fix what she had done tonight. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the room, watching his phone light up with notifications, news alerts, stock price crashes, investor calls, angry emails. His carefully built empire was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing he could do about it. By the time he finally moved, finally stumbled toward the exit, he was already a ghost. The man who had walked into this restaurant as one of New York's most celebrated CEOs was walking out as a cautionary tale. Power without honor was nothing, and Marcus Ashford had just learned that lesson in the most devastating way possible.
The black Mercedes limousine glided through the Manhattan streets in silence. Inside, Elena sat beside her father, her head resting against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her composed through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her feeling hollow and fragile. Alexander had one arm wrapped protectively around his daughter, his other hand holding his phone as he read through the incoming reports. His face remained calm, but his eyes were sharp, tracking every development with the precision of a chess master watching his opponent's pieces fall. "The stock is down 42%, he said quietly. "Ashford Technologies has lost $6 billion in market value in the last 30 minutes. The after-hours trading in Asia is brutal." Elena closed her eyes. "Good," she whispered. Alexander looked down at her, his expression softening. "Are you okay? Really okay? Should we stop at the hospital, have them check on the baby?" "I'm okay, Dad," Elena said, though her voice trembled slightly. "She's moving. I can feel her. She's fine." "She?" Alexander's stern face broke into the first genuine smile of the evening. "You found out?" Elena nodded, placing her hand on her belly. "Last week, I was going to tell you at dinner tonight, before—" She trailed off, the memory of what had happened still too fresh and painful. "A granddaughter," Alexander said softly, wonder in his voice. He placed his large hand gently over Elena's smaller one on her belly.
She's going to be extraordinary, just like her mother. Tears finally came, hot and overwhelming. Elena had held them back through the entire ordeal, refused to give Victoria or Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her break. But here, safe with her father, the walls came down. "I was so stupid," she sobbed. "You warned me about him. You told me he was using me, and I didn't listen. I thought I knew better. I thought I could see the real him beneath the ambition." "Shh," Alexander soothed, pulling her closer. "You weren't stupid. You were in love. Love makes us all hope for the best in people, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. You're human, Elena. That's not a weakness." "I let him treat me like I was worthless," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I stayed hidden. I made myself small because he asked me to. I convinced myself it was temporary, that he just needed time to get his business settled. But the truth is, he was ashamed of me." "No," Alexander said firmly. "He was terrified of you. Men like Marcus Ashford need to be the most powerful person in every room. You threatened that. Your intelligence, your education, your strength, all of it made him feel small. So he tried to make you smaller to compensate for his own inadequacy." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are Elena Cross. You speak 5 languages. You have degrees from 2 of the world's best universities. You've negotiated deals with presidents and kings. You've built schools in Africa and hospitals in South Asia. You are brilliant, compassionate, and stronger than any man who would try to diminish you." "Then why do I feel so broken?" Elena whispered. "Because healing hurts, but you will heal, and when you do, you'll be even stronger than before. I promise you that." The car pulled into the private underground garage of Alexander's penthouse building. It was a fortress, more secure than most government installations, with layers of security that ensured complete privacy. As they exited the car, Alexander's head of security, a former Navy SEAL named James Carter, approached them. He was a tall, muscular man with steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. "Sir, ma'am," Carter said with a respectful nod. "The situation is developing rapidly. The story broke on social media 17 minutes ago. It's trending globally. #ElenaCross. It's #1 on Twitter. The video footage from the restaurant has been viewed 12 million times and counting." Alexander nodded. "The full security footage? Being released to the press as we speak, sir. Multiple angles, high definition, with audio. There will be no question about what happened." "Good. What's the status on Ashford and Stone?" Carter consulted his tablet. "Marcus Ashford is still at the restaurant, from what our contacts report. He appears to be in shock. His phone has been ringing non-stop. Multiple board members have resigned from Ashford Technologies in the last hour. The company's emergency board meeting has been called tomorrow morning." "And Victoria Stone?" "She left the restaurant about 10 minutes after you did. Our sources say she's at her father's estate. Gerald Stone has been making frantic calls trying to contain the damage, but the video is spreading too fast. Several of Stone Properties' major clients have already issued statements distancing themselves from the family." Elena listened to all this with a strange detachment. Just this morning, she was invisible, a secret wife, hidden away, afraid to rock the boat. Now her name was trending worldwide. Her face would be on every news outlet by morning. Her story would be told and retold millions of times. The thought was terrifying and liberating at the same time. "I want to make a statement," she said suddenly. Both men looked at her in surprise. "Elena," Alexander said carefully, "you don't have to do anything tonight. You've been through trauma. You need to rest. Let the doctors check on the baby." "No," Elena interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "If I don't speak now, other people will speak for me. They'll turn this into whatever narrative serves them best. I'll become a victim or a villain or a gold digger or whatever sells the most papers. I want to tell my story, on my terms. Alexander studied Elena's face, seeing the determination there. It reminded him of her mother, the brilliant economist he had married 30 years ago, who had died when Elena was only 10. His wife had been the same way, fierce, principled, unwilling to let others define her. "All right," he said, "but we do it properly. Carter, get our communications team here. I want a full setup, professional lighting, camera, microphone. This isn't going to be some shaky cell phone video. If my daughter is going to address the world, she's going to do it with dignity." 30 minutes later, Elena sat in her father's study, a room lined with books and filled with the quiet power of old money and older wisdom. The communications team had worked quickly, setting up professional lighting and a camera. They had offered to do her hair and makeup, but Elena had refused. She wore simple clothes, a soft gray sweater and dark pants. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which she had removed and placed on the desk in front of her. The camera's red light blinked on. Elena took a deep breath and looked directly into the lens. "My name is Elena Cross. By now, many of you have seen the video from the Golden Crown restaurant tonight. You've seen me pushed to the ground. You've seen me kicked while I was trying to protect my unborn baby. And you've probably seen the aftermath when my father, Alexander Cross, walked in and confronted the people responsible." She paused, gathering her thoughts.
I want to tell you my story. Not the version that will be in tomorrow's headlines, but the truth. 6 months ago, I married a man named Marcus Ashford. I was in love. He was brilliant, charming, and ambitious. He told me he loved me too. He told me we would build a life together. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes showed the pain beneath it. Shortly after we married, Marcus asked me to keep our marriage a secret. He said it was for business reasons. His company was in the middle of important negotiations, and he needed to maintain a certain image. He asked me to be patient, to wait just a little longer, and then we could announce everything properly. She looked down at the wedding ring on the desk. I waited. I stayed home while he attended galas and parties. I stayed silent while he was photographed with other women. I convinced myself that his career was important, that I was being supportive, that love meant making sacrifices. Her jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago, I saw him on television, proposing to another woman, Victoria Stone, the same woman who pushed me to the ground tonight, the same woman who kicked me while I lay there, 6 months pregnant with my husband's child. The pain in her voice was raw and real. When I confronted Marcus about it, he told me it was just for show, a business arrangement. He said Victoria's father's connections were valuable and the engagement would help finalize some important deals. He promised it didn't mean anything. He asked me to be patient just a little longer. She looked back at the camera, and her eyes were blazing now. I was patient. I was understanding. I made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient because I thought that's what love required. But tonight, I learned the truth. Love doesn't require you to disappear. Love doesn't ask you to be a secret. Real love celebrates you, protects you, and honors you. Her hand moved to her belly. Tonight, I was on the floor of that restaurant, protecting my baby, and my husband, the man who promised to love and cherish me, looked right through me like I was nothing. He called me miss. He told me to leave. He stood by while I was attacked because acknowledging me would have been inconvenient for his image. The anger in her voice was controlled but unmistakable. Some people will say I should have known better, that I should have seen the signs, that I was naive or stupid or too trusting. And maybe they're right, but I refuse to be ashamed of having loved someone. I refuse to be ashamed of having hope. The only people who should be ashamed tonight are the ones who chose cruelty over kindness, image over integrity,
in power over basic human decency. She picked up the wedding ring and held it to the camera. This ring represented a promise that was broken the moment Marcus asked me to hide. I'm done hiding. I'm done being a secret. I'm done making myself small for people who should have been making me feel infinite. She set the ring down firmly. To every woman watching this who has ever been made to feel like she is too much or not enough, who has ever been asked to shrink herself to fit someone else's comfort, who has ever been told her voice is too loud or her ambitions are too big, don't you dare make yourself smaller. Don't you dare hide your light because someone else is afraid of the dark. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. I am Elena Cross. I have a doctorate from Oxford. I speak 5 languages. I have helped build hospitals and schools around the world. I am 6 months pregnant with a daughter who will grow up knowing that her worth is not determined by who loves her or who doesn't. And I will not be defined by the worst thing that happened to me tonight. I will be defined by how I rise from it. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. To Marcus Ashford in Victoria Stone, your cruelty revealed your character. My response will reveal mine. You wanted me to disappear. Instead, I'm stepping into the light. And I'm going to use every resource, every connection, and every bit of influence I have to make sure that what you did to me never happens to another woman again. She sat back, her expression softening slightly. To my father, who has always been my greatest champion, thank you for teaching me that real power isn't about dominating others, it's about lifting them up. Thank you for showing me that integrity matters more than image, and character is built in the moments when no one is watching. Her hand rested on her belly again. And to my daughter, who I will meet in 3 months, I promise you a world where strength and kindness aren't opposites, where intelligence is celebrated, not feared, where your voice will always matter, and where you'll never have to make yourself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. She looked directly into the camera one last time. My name is Elena Cross. I am not a victim. I am not a scandal. I am not someone's secret or someone's shame. I am a woman who loved and lost and learned. And I am just getting started. The red light blinked off. For a moment, Elena sat in silence, the weight of what she had just done settling over her. Then her father, who had been watching from behind the camera, began to clap. The communications team joined in, their applause genuine and moved. Elena stood, suddenly exhausted, but also strangely energized. She had told her truth. Whatever came next, at least it would be on her terms.
The dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the penthouse suite of Mount Sinai Hospital, Elena Cross held her daughter for the first time. The baby was perfect, tiny and wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. She had Elena's dark hair, and when she briefly opened her eyes, a hint of the same jade green that marked the Cross family. "Hello, Sophia," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting to meet you." Alexander stood beside the bed, his stern businessman facade completely shattered by the sight of his granddaughter. He touched one tiny hand with his finger, and Sophia's grip tightened reflexively. "She's strong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Like her mother." The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Elena's video had been viewed over 200 million times. It had sparked a global conversation about power, abuse, and the treatment of women. Thousands of women had shared their own stories of being asked to make themselves smaller, to hide, to be convenient. The hashtag #NotYourSecret had trended for weeks. The fallout for Marcus and Victoria had been swift and total.
Ashford Technologies had collapsed within 2 weeks. The SEC investigation that Alexander had initiated had uncovered massive financial fraud, inflated projections, fabricated contracts, and outright lies to investors. Marcus was currently facing multiple criminal charges, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and investor deception. His assets had been frozen, his luxury penthouse had been seized. The golden boy of the tech world was now facing the possibility of 20 years in federal prison. Victoria's fate had been equally devastating. The video of her pushing and kicking a pregnant woman had destroyed her reputation beyond repair. Every brand she had worked with had terminated their contracts. She had been banned from the social clubs and charity organizations that had once been her entire world. Her father, desperate to save Stone Properties from the scandal, had publicly disowned her, cutting her off financially and removing her from the family business entirely. Last Elena had heard, Victoria was living in a small apartment in Queens, working as a receptionist and trying to avoid the photographers who still occasionally followed her, hoping to capture the fallen socialite's continued humiliation. Elena felt no satisfaction in their destruction, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. Marcus and Victoria had had everything: wealth, opportunity, privilege, and they had chosen to use it for cruelty rather than kindness. But Elena had chosen a different path. Using her father's resources and her own considerable skills, she launched the Sophia Foundation, named for the daughter she was still carrying at the time. The foundation focused on supporting women who had been economically or socially trapped by abusive partners. It provided legal assistance, job training, housing support, and educational scholarships. Within the first month, the Sophia Foundation had received over $500 million in donations from people around the world who had been moved by Elena's story. Women who had never spoken about their own experiences found the courage to come forward. Men who recognized their own past behaviors pledged to do better. Elena had also taken a very public role in her father's company, Cross Global Enterprises. She no longer operated in the shadows. She attended board meetings, led negotiations, and became the face of several major humanitarian initiatives. Forbes had recently named her one of the 30 most powerful women in business under 40. The woman who had been kicked on a restaurant floor 6 months ago was now reshaping industries and changing lives. A soft knock on the hospital room door interrupted her thoughts. A nurse peeked in, smiling warmly. "Miss Cross, you have some visitors if you're up for it. They say they're from the Sophia Foundation." Elena nodded. "Send them in, please." 3 women entered, each carrying flowers. Elena recognized them immediately. They were beneficiaries of the foundation, women who had escaped abusive situations with the foundation's help and were now thriving. "We heard the baby came," said Maria, a young woman who had fled a violent marriage with her 2 children and was now completing her nursing degree with the Sophia Foundation scholarship. "We did have to," interrupted Jasmine, a former executive who had been financially controlled by her husband for 15 years before the foundation helped her rebuild. "You told our stories when we couldn't. You used your—"
My daughter will grow up knowing her origin story. She'll know that she was carried by a mother who was kicked while trying to protect her. She'll know that she was born into a world that can be cruel and unjust. But she'll also know that her existence sparked a movement, that her name is now associated with hope and healing, that the worst moment of my life became the catalyst for the best work I will ever do. The applause was thunderous now. Elena raised her hand for silence. There are 2 people who aren't here tonight, but whose actions made all of this possible. Marcus Ashford and Victoria Stone showed me in the cruelest way imaginable that I was worth more than I had been taught to believe. They tried to break me, and instead, they freed me. She paused, her expression serious. I don't forgive them. I don't wish them well,
but I do thank them for revealing their true natures before I wasted any more of my life on people who would never see my value. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing because it forces you to wake up and choose yourself." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. Elena stepped back from the podium, gently bouncing Sophia, who had started to fuss. As the gala continued around her, Elena found herself thinking about the woman she had been a year ago. Quiet, hidden, afraid to take up space. That woman felt like a stranger now. She had been broken and rebuilt. She had been knocked down and had risen. She had been someone's secret and had become the world's inspiration. And she had done it all while growing a tiny human, giving birth and learning to be a mother. If that wasn't power, she didn't know what was. Epilogue, 2 years later. The headline in the Wall Street Journal read, "Cross Global Enterprises announces Elena Cross as new CEO." In a stunning move that surprised exactly no one who had been paying attention, Alexander Cross had stepped down from the company he had built, handing the reins to his daughter. At 34 years old, Elena Cross became one of the youngest female CEOs of a Fortune 500 company and the head of an empire worth over $800 billion. Her first major decision as CEO was announced in the same press release. Cross Global Enterprises would be implementing a new company-wide policy requiring paid parental leave, on-site childcare, and strict anti-discrimination protections for pregnant employees and parents. "Business and family aren't enemies," Elena said in the press conference. "They're partners, and any company that can't figure out how to support both is a company that deserves to fail." The policy sent shockwaves in the business world. Other companies scrambled to match it, afraid of losing talent to a competitor that actually valued their employees as whole human beings. In her office, on the 72nd floor of the Cross Global building, Elena stood at the window, looking out over Manhattan. Sophia, now 2 years old, was in the company's state-of-the-art childcare center 3 floors below, probably painting or building towers with blocks or bossing around the other children with the same imperious confidence her mother was now learning to wield in boardrooms. Her assistant buzzed in. "Miss Cross, you have a call on line 3. It's Marcus Ashford." Elena's hand stilled on the glass. She hadn't heard that name in over a year. Last she knew, he had been released from prison after serving 18 months of a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperating with federal investigators. His company was gone. His fortune was gone. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. "Put him through," Elena said quietly. She picked up the phone. "This is Elena Cross." "Elena." Her voice was different, smaller, broken. I know I have no right to call you. I know you probably never want to hear from you again, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for what I allowed to happen, for being such a coward." Elena said nothing, just listened. "I lost everything," Marcus continued, his voice cracking, "and I deserved to. I know that now. I've had a lot of time to think about the kind of man I was, and I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed." "Why are you calling me?" Elena asked, her voice neutral. "Because you deserved better than what I gave you. You deserve to be celebrated, not hidden. You deserve to be protected, not abandoned. And our daughter," his voice broke completely, "our daughter deserved a father who was worthy of her. I failed in every possible way." Elena looked at a photo on her desk. Sophia, smiling at the camera, her jade green eyes sparkling with mischief and intelligence. She looked nothing like Marcus. She was all Elena and all Alexander Cross, strong, brilliant, and already showing signs of the formidable woman she would become. "Sophia is fine," Elena said. "She's happy, she's loved, she's thriving. Does she ask about me?" "No," Elena said simply, "because I've never told her about you. As far as she knows, her family is me and her grandfather, and that's all she needs." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with grief. "That's fair," Marcus finally said. "That's more than fair. I wanted you to know that I know what I lost. I know what I threw away. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid and too selfish to see it." "Yes," Elena agreed, "you were. For what it's worth, I saw the news about you becoming CEO. You're going to be incredible. You already are." "I know," Elena said, without arrogance, just simple truth. "Can I ask one thing?" "You can ask. If Sophia ever wants to know about me, will you tell her the truth, not a sanitized version, the real truth, what I did, who I was? I don't want her to wonder. I want her to know that her father was a failure, but that her mother was extraordinary." Elena considered this. "If she asks, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her that you were brilliant but broken, that you chose ambition over integrity and image over love. I'll tell her that you failed every test that mattered. But I'll also tell her that the worst thing you did became the catalyst for the best thing I became." "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "Goodbye, Marcus," Elena said. "Don't call again." She hung up before he could respond. For a moment, she stood in silence, processing the conversation. Then she pressed the intercom button. "Sarah, please have my car brought around. I'm going to pick up Sophia early. I want to take her to the park." "Of course, Miss Cross." Elena gathered her things, but before leaving, she paused at the window one more time, looking out at the city that had witnessed her destruction and her rebirth. She thought about the woman who had been kicked on a restaurant floor 3 years ago. That woman was someone's secret, someone's shame, someone's convenient wife who could be hidden when necessary. That woman was gone. In her place stood Elena Cross, CEO, philanthropist, mother, and a force of nature who had turned her pain into purpose and her humiliation into a worldwide movement. She had been knocked down, she had gotten back up, and she had built an empire while doing it. As she walked out of her office toward the elevator that would take her to her daughter, Elena smiled. The arrogant billionaire who had kicked his pregnant wife in public, thinking she was poor and powerless, had been signing a $1 trillion deal that night. Not with her father, with her. He just hadn't known it yet. But the whole world knew it now.
The screen fades to Elena sitting with Sophia in a park, laughing as the little girl runs toward the camera. Narrator, Elena's voice. "They asked me once if I regretted going public with my story, if I wished I had handled things quietly, privately, the way respectable people do. I told them no, because silence protects the wrong people. Silence protects the abusers, the bullies, the people who use power as a weapon instead of a responsibility. My story isn't unique. Thousands of women have been exactly where I was, told to be smaller, quieter, more convenient, told that their dreams were too big, their voices too loud, their presence too much. This story is for them. For every woman who has ever been kicked while she was down, for every woman who has been told she should be grateful for crumbs while others feast, for every woman who has made herself invisible so someone else could shine. You are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You deserve to be celebrated, not hidden. You deserve to be protected, not abandoned. And if the people in your life can't see your worth, then they don't deserve a place in your story. My name is Elena Koss. I was kicked while I was pregnant, and I turned that moment into a movement. What will you do with yours?